I'd like to start by talking specifically about some of the executive orders you've signed in Oregon to push the state towards greater energy efficiency. Could you talk about a couple of the key issues you've taken on and how you're doing?
Well, we've had a great partnership with the legislature, so we've been able to move forward both in terms of legislation and in terms of executive action. The executive order that I signed capped carbon emissions and will move us toward net zero. We've also had a great partnership with our legislature, but here's the harsh reality. The transportation sector is the largest single source of greenhouse gas emissions in Oregon, and I'm assuming across the United States. And pollutants from diesel and gasoline engines pose immediate public health risks for our most vulnerable communities, our Black, our Indigenous, our Latino, Latina, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, tribal, and communities of color, and our rural communities. So we have to do everything we can to tackle climate change. We had, as you saw from the clip, a horrific wildfire season last year. We had the worst wildfire season that we've ever had. We lost over 4,000 homes during the wildfires. And this year, unfortunately, we are facing one of the worst droughts that we have had, with huge impacts on agriculture and on our tribes in Southern Oregon. So it's critically important that we move forward. That's why I signed an executive order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Oregon by 45% of 1990 levels by 2035 and 80% by 2050. Obviously, transportation is a critical part of that plan. And then most recently passed legislation that my administration sponsored to expand access to electric vehicles and charging infrastructure, particularly for families that are low income, our communities of color, and our rural communities. So all of these actions are critically important.
So we'll talk in a little bit about the timber industry and that role that it plays as well in climate change. But first, I'd like to ask you about incentives you're putting behind electric vehicles, because clearly if transportation is playing such a significant role, they're an important move for you.
So the legislation I most recently signed, House Bill 2165, it's a rebate program, and we strengthened our current rebate program to better serve our BIPOC, rural, and low-income communities. And we also created an investment fund through Oregon's electric utilities and EV infrastructure, with half of the investment targeted to our historically underserved communities, our BIPOC, rural, and low-income communities.
Thank you. And what about charging stations? I gather you've put a number of charging stations along some of the major corridors for commercial vehicles. How do they fit into this plan?
Well, I just have to brag for a minute about Oregon. Because of the work my administration has done, and because Oregonians want to lead on progressive public policy tackling the environment, we now have over 34,000 EVs registered in Oregon and 1,900 public chargers. We rank fourth in the nation for EVs per capita. In terms of the commercial side, honestly, this is all developed through an incredibly strong public-private partnership. And Oregon is home to the first public commercial vehicle fast charging station on the I-5 corridor. And this was made possible by a partnership between Daimler Trucks and Portland General Electric. And it is equipped with 8 vehicle charging stations that can be used by electric semi-trucks, buses, and box vans. And it's really the first step to electrify the 1,300 miles of the I-5 corridor along the West Coast. So I'm really excited about it. This is historic. It is long overdue, and I'm really pleased to see the West moving in this direction.